As we begin this morning, I want to share a Christmas story with you. It begins like this. Mom and Dad, I'm pregnant. The 13-year-old girl trembles a little as she leaks this well-kept secret to the only two people whom she dares trust as a fragile teenager with child. She has held on to this knowledge for only a few days, but those days have aged her soul and marked it to be like one of a woman who is much wiser, much more tired than just a week ago. She knows what to expect next. Tears from her mother, anger from her father, and of course there is him, the very one who holds the power and light of life or death over her. What will he think? What will he say? What will he do? In an instant, the mother feels as though her whole world is crashing down around her. None of this makes sense, and confusion swirls around in her mind. Her heartbeat grows so rapid that her entire body begins to shake. This can't be. Not my daughter. I raised her better than this, she thinks. But with those two words uttered by her little girl, it was all over. Dreams shattered, no hope for her little girl's future, no joy for this family ever again. Rage fills her father. Who did this to you? He tries to temper his voice, but it borders on that of a violent scream. Was it one of the soldiers? Tell me, I know you. You never would have done this of your own will. He slumps against the wall and begins to cry. My daughter, I have done so much to provide for you and to protect you, and now there's nothing I can do. You might not even live to see another Sabbath. This is a scene from the first Christmas. Well, maybe not an exact representation, but if we read between the lines of the story of Mary, we have to understand that at some point a conversation like this must have happened between her and her parents. Fragile teenager with child, parents disappointed, wondering what the future for their little girl would be, and of course, her betrothed, a young man who loses all trust in his bride-to-be. This is never the picture that we put on the front of Christmas cards, is it? Faces full of fear and anxiety, cheeks stained with tears. We want to skip over the very real human part of Christmas every year, don't we? We want to jump ahead to the stable, to the Holy Family, Mary and Joseph gazing down upon the newborn in the manger, cows and sheep smiling, and of course, halos around everyone's heads. But this first Christmas was anything but peaceful and serene. We begin the season of Advent in late November or early December, and we give Mary about 4 weeks. 4 weeks from Immaculate Conception to a very sanitized birth. We make it into a 2-hour Hallmark Channel movie, and we wrap it up nicely because after all, it's the holidays. We don't want to bring the ugliness of struggle and pain into this season. We want to laugh, exchange gifts, eat way too many cookies. But then when it's all over, we're left wondering, why did this season not connect with me? Why did it not connect with where I really am in my life? We do a great disservice to the beautiful mess that this first Christmas actually was. We never allow ourselves to walk with Mary through her pregnancy. We give her 1 week or maybe 2 before Christmas, and then we jump ahead, forgetting that this young child endured 9 months of a shameful pregnancy. 9 months of gossip. 9 months of fear knocking at the door. 9 months of not knowing what lies ahead. But when we read Mary's story in its entirety, we discover that she not only endured these 9 months, she found joy in them. For she found camaraderie with her cousin Elizabeth, another quite unlikely pregnancy. And she experienced the true gift of mercy when her betrothed chose to stand by her side instead of casting her aside. And she received the true gift of what it meant to completely submit herself to the will and plans of God. But more than all of these, she carried the Son of God inside of her. She felt Jesus grow and move and kick. She saw her stomach grow and knew that God had indeed become flesh. Yes, there were probably a lot of nights where Jesus made Mary quite uncomfortable. I hope there are nights when Jesus makes you uncomfortable. There were probably nights where she'd lie awake wondering, what would this all mean for her future and the future of this unborn child? Martin Luther, in one of his Christmas sermons, said that there were 3 miracles that happened at Christ's birth. That God became human, that a virgin conceived, and that Mary believed. And for Luther, the greatest of these 3 miracles was that Mary believed. Despite the pain and struggle of those 9 months, of those sleepless nights, Mary experienced the joy of heaven. For the joy of heaven was God's very presence within her. The joy of heaven here and now, not in some far-off, distant afterlife, and not in a picture-perfect world, but here and now, a joy that isn't dependent upon our circumstances, but only dependent upon God's presence in us. Far from the idyllic image we often paint of Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus, this holy family, they instead fit into just about every category of outcasts that we could craft, both in their ancient society as well as in ours today. We see teenage pregnancy, a young girl pregnant outside of wedlock, Joseph having to plead his innocence before people. We see poverty. This young couple was from a peasant town, not a place of opulence, not even a middle-class suburb. We see homelessness, a family giving birth to their child in the filth of a stable with animals instead of a sanitized room with trained midwives. They were political refugees. They were immigrants who had to flee their own country, crossing borders in the middle of the night just to keep their child safe from harm. This holy family that we so esteem might be considered anything but esteemed if we were to meet them today. They seem to have everything in the world going against them. Yet God calls them highly favored. And there was joy. Not because of anything that the world had given them. In fact, the world had done everything to beat them down, even tried to kill them. There was joy because heaven was with them. There was joy because Jesus was with them. You might not expect to find a family of teenage motherhood, living in poverty, homeless, in a foreign nation under the threat of death to be a family of joy, but isn't that what we've said Advent should be all about? Expecting the unexpected. Expecting to find the power of God not in a victorious battle cry, but in the cries of a hungry newborn. Expecting to find salvation not in being freed from the struggles of life, but being found faithful through the struggles of life. Expecting to find joy not in a perfect life, but in a God who loves us perfectly. This is the joy of heaven. Not a longing to escape, but a recognition that there is someone who sits with us in the filth of the stable. A presence that transforms the messy pain of life into a hope of faith that Emmanuel has come, not to free us from all pain today, but to set us free by the truth of the victory that is to come. In life, we shouldn't expect the joy of heaven when everything is going our way, because typically when things are going according to plan, we expect very little from God as we grow more and more dependent upon ourselves. Instead, it is in the times of struggle when we are carrying unexpected burdens that we recognize that God has been with us all along, walking with us. And that recognition is what gives us the peace that passes all understanding, a joy that seems antithetical to the pain that seeks to rob us of who we are. It is in the laboring of life that God's incarnation is most authentic and most powerful. For you see, it's easy to praise God during the easy times of life, but when, like Mary, we can say, "Let it be," we can experience the joy of heaven. For heaven is not a place where we will go. Heaven is wherever God goes. Notice that when the messenger first appeared to Mary, she was troubled. In the midst of unexpected pains and trials, our response of fear is to be expected, but Mary had a choice to make. Would fear be the leading charge of her life, or would faith? Let it be as you have said. That was her declaration of faith, that she believed that God was going to do something new in her. That was her moment of grace. That was the moment where she chose joy. Mary was not said to be the most righteous person, the most skilled person. She really didn't have any credentials at all, other than her willingness to completely submit. And that's what she did to the core of her being. She trusted and submitted her life to God's plans. As I already mentioned, we give Mary about 4 weeks to conceive and give birth. But let's not forget, it was 9 months. 9 months. In our own times of uncertainty, of struggle, of doubt, we want the quick fix. We want the quick solution. We believe that God can bring beauty out of our mess, but we want God to do it right now. And when we are called to wait, so often we lose faith. We fail to remember that God's plans for us take time to grow and develop within us, and it even takes pain to bring it forth into the world. Patience and pain. Those aren't words we typically associate with the holiday season. In fact, those are words that we don't like to think about at all. But those 2 words are necessary if we are going to allow God to develop, grow, and bring new life from us. But so often we equate our pain with God's lack of concern or action in us, and we fail to remember God's promises to us, and instead we believe that even this time, God cannot heal or save or redeem us. There's a book called Sober Mercies: How Love Caught Up with a Christian Drunk. And the author, Heather Kopp, writes this. She says, "In the past, if you were to ask me what went so terribly wrong that I ended up a miserable drunk, I could have come up with a long and convincing list. But today, if you ask me that question, this answer would be equally true. Nothing. Nothing went so wrong that I escaped God's will or God's love for me. Nothing went so wrong that it couldn't be a part of my spiritual journey. Nothing went so wrong that God couldn't turn it into something beautiful." Perhaps one of the greatest lessons that the story of Christmas can teach us is that we have a God who uses the messiness of the human experience to birth redemption into the world. We have a God who becomes a helpless child to defeat the kingdom of darkness. We have a God who uses the pains of birth to defeat the power of death. We have a God who gives us the joy of heaven in spite of the struggles of earth. So let me ask you this morning, what is robbing you of your joy? For some of us, let's be honest, those things are really superficial. I haven't finished all my Christmas shopping. I still have 18 dozen cookies to bake. I've got to get the house cleaned for all the friends and family that are coming to see me. Or here's a good one. I'm really stressed out over packing for my vacation. Folks, if those are the things robbing you of your joy today, I have a very deep and profound and spiritual word for you. Get over it. It's not that big of a deal. As Scott said last week, those are first world problems. But some of you this morning are experiencing some deep and raw pain. Some of you have lost a spouse this last year. This will be your first Christmas without him or her. Some of you will be with your children, but those relationships have become so strained that you're dreading the time together. And some of you won't see your children at all because it's just become easier to make excuses instead of dealing with the hurt. Some of you are living in marriages that feel as though they've become nothing more than polite pleasantries. And the thought of having to fake it one more year makes you feel like you're living in a prison. Some of you are in recovery from addictions, and the next 2 weeks are going to do everything they can to pull you back into those addictions. And some of you are living in denial of your addictions, and the next 2 weeks are only going to wrap themselves even deeper in your heart and in your soul. Some of you are going to look on Facebook and you're going to see the pictures of the perfect families and their perfect Christmases. And you're going to wonder once more why it never happened for you. And some of you right now are wondering if God even remembers you or if God even exists at all. The point, folks, is that I know that there's a lot of deep hurt in this room today. And the point of this message isn't to minimize that hurt, and it's not to encourage you to push it down or just fake it to get through. The point of our story this morning is this: to remind you that when God wants to do a new thing in your life, it is almost always done through your pain. Now, make no mistake, God is not the author of our pain, but God is the redeemer and the healer of our pain. The entirety of our whole story with God is that we have a God who knows what all of our pain is because we have a God who chooses to enter into it and has so from the very beginning. In the Old Testament, we see a God who weeps and mourns for God's children when they find themselves in slavery, in exile because of their sin. And so God chooses to enter into the pain of becoming a human being. God chooses the pains of birth. God chooses to become a boy who has to grow into his manhood and has to figure out, who am I? Growing in wisdom as the Gospels teach us. We have a God who knows the pain of having his own mother and brothers not understand him, but at times even tell people he's crazy. The pain of having people walk away from him. The pain of having friends betray and deny him. The pain of weeping in the garden, begging his dad to please take this away from me. The pain of submitting to God's greater plan for the world. The pain of death. Jesus dying on the cross, but also the Father experiencing the death of a child. When we say that we have a God who walks with us through our pain, we say that because we have a God who has experienced every type of pain there is long before any of us were ever here. And because we have a God who has experienced pain, we have a God who will redeem our pain. God used the pains of birth and death to redeem the universe. God will use your pain to redeem and save you. This is how we can expect the joy of heaven, here and now. For there is no darkness, no pain, no grief, no sorrow, no sickness that can separate us from God. And there is no pain, no sorrow, no darkness, no sickness that can ever overcome God. This is the joy of heaven. Emmanuel, God within us, growing salvation and healing and redemption within us, birthing newness of life for the whole world through us. Thanks be to our healer and redeemer. Amen.